I don't miss the Sunday dinners anymore. I know that sounds cold, maybe even a little broken, but I've made my peace with it. I drive a beat-up Civic I bought off Craigslist 3 years ago, and I fixed the AC myself with a YouTube tutorial and $14 in parts. It works fine. I work fine. Everything is fine now, and that word, fine, used to feel like settling. Now it feels like something I fought for. Let me back up. I'm 31. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist at a clinic in Columbus. I've been doing this work for 6 years, and I love it the way you love something that also exhausts you, completely without reservations. I rent a 2-bedroom apartment. The second bedroom has a reading chair, a plant named Gerald, and shelves I built myself from brackets I bought at Home Depot. Nobody sleeps in it. That's not sad. That's chosen. My family lives 40 minutes south of me in the house I grew up in. My parents have been married for 38 years. My younger sister lives with her husband in a subdivision about 10 minutes from them. They have 2 kids, boys, 5 and 7, and they go to my parents' house for dinner almost every Sunday. For a long time, I went too. I should explain something about my family before I tell you what happened at the restaurant, because without that context, the restaurant story sounds like one bad night. It wasn't one bad night. It was the night I finally let myself see what every night had been. My parents immigrated from the Philippines when I was 4. My dad worked 2 jobs until I was 12, then 1. My mom cleaned houses until I was 16, then got a job at a dental office, which she still has. They sacrificed genuinely and enormously, and I say this without resentment. I know what it cost them to raise us here. I watched it happen. I felt the weight of it growing up. But somewhere in that weight, a certain story got told about who I was supposed to be. I was the responsible one, the smart one, the one who would figure things out. My sister, I'll call her by what she's always been in the family, the baby, was 3 years younger and wired entirely differently. Louder, funnier, easier to be around at parties. My dad used to say she had his personality and I had my mum's, and he said it like a compliment to both of us, but what it really meant was that she was the one you wanted in the room and I was the one you called when something needed to get done. By the time I was in college, I was filling out their tax returns. By the time I graduated, I was the one they called when the car broke down, when a bill didn't make sense, when my dad needed to email his boss about something sensitive. I didn't mind it at first. It felt like contributing. It felt like a fair exchange for everything they'd given me. What I didn't notice, or maybe didn't let myself notice, was that the exchange had stopped being mutual somewhere along the way. My sister got married at 24. Her husband, who I will call my brother-in-law because that's all he's ever been to me, is a guy who makes a fine living selling insurance and has a very specific talent for being in the room when good things happen and somewhere else entirely when something needs to be done. Within a year of their wedding, my parents were watching the kids 3 days a week. Within 2 years, my dad was mowing their lawn because my brother-in-law's back was acting up. Within 3 years, my parents had quietly lent them $11,000 for a down payment on their house. I know the exact number because I helped draft the repayment agreement that never once got referenced again. I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself the money was theirs to give. But I was also the one who sent my parents $200 a month without being asked, from the time I got my first real paycheck until recently. I was the one who drove my mum to her cardiologist appointment because my sister had something with the kids that day, and the next time, and the time after that. I was the one who spent a Saturday helping my dad refile 4 years of tax paperwork after he made some mistakes with his home office deductions. I was the one who didn't go to my friend's bachelorette trip because my parents needed me to be available that weekend for something that turned out to be nothing. None of those things are martyrdom. I want to be careful about that. I made those choices. What I'm saying is that those choices were seen differently depending on who made them. When I did something for the family, it was expected. When my sister couldn't, there was always a reason, and the reason was always legitimate, and my parents always nodded and found another way, usually through me. The restaurant was my dad's 65th birthday dinner. He'd been talking about it for months. My mum had picked the place, an Italian restaurant downtown called Volta. Not the kind of place our family normally went. the kind that has small plates and valet parking and a pasta dish on the menu that costs $68. My mum had made a reservation for 9 people, my parents, my sister and her husband, their 2 boys, and me. I came alone. I should say I had offered, 2 weeks before, to contribute to the dinner. My mom had said, "Don't worry about it, we'll just split it at the end." That felt reasonable. I'd done the math in my head. 9 people, nice place, maybe $150, $200 my share with drinks. Fine. What I did not know until I was sitting at the table, looking at the menu, was that my brother-in-law had already told my parents he and my sister would not be splitting anything because, and I'm quoting my mum, who told me this in a low voice over the bread basket, "They're dealing with some things right now." I looked at her. What things? She did a small shrug that meant, "Don't ask." I ordered sparkling water. I looked at the menu. There was a pappardelle with short rib that I genuinely wanted. I ordered the smaller pasta, the one that was $32, because I was now doing different math. My sister ordered the $68 pasta. My brother-in-law ordered a ribeye and a glass of Barolo. My nephews ordered from the children's menu, 2 plates of buttered pasta at $14 each. The dinner was fine. In that early way, dinners are fine before they aren't. My dad was happy. He ordered a glass of whiskey and talked about his childhood, which he doesn't do often, and I was glad I was there for that part. My mom laughed at something my brother-in-law said and touched my dad's arm, and for a while it just felt like a family at dinner. Then my sister's older nephew, her younger boy, actually, reached across the table toward the bread basket, and my brother-in-law gently redirected him. "You'll eat when we get home," he said quietly. "This bread is expensive." The kid is 5. He looked at the bread and then looked down, and my chest did something uncomfortable. I said, "He can have some bread. It's already on the table, it's—" "He's fine," my sister said, not unkindly, but in a way that closed the subject. I let it go. I looked at the menu again, even though I'd already ordered. 20 minutes later, when the food came, I watched my sister cut her pasta into pieces and put half of it into the to-go container that she'd asked the waiter to bring before she'd even tasted it. I watched her lean over and give a few bites to the younger boy from her own fork. "The kids don't get their own plates?" I asked. I kept my voice neutral. "They'll eat real food at home," my brother-in-law said, in a tone that suggested this was efficient parenting. "We don't spend $68 on pasta for kids." My dad, I want to be careful here because I love my dad, but my dad laughed, not at the kids. I don't think he meant it that way. He laughed the way you laugh when someone says something slightly uncomfortable and you want to smooth it over with sound. But he also said, "That's right, you can eat at home." And he sort of aimed it in the direction of the boys, who were sitting there with nothing on the table in front of them except a glass of Sprite. The 5-year-old looked up. His older brother was on his phone. I sat with that for a moment. Then I called the waiter over. I ordered the kids 2 plates of the buttered pasta. My sister said, "Oh, you don't have to do that." "I know," I said. My brother-in-law said something about not wanting to make a thing of it. I told him it wasn't a thing. The waiter wrote it down and left. My dad said pleasantly, "You're always so generous," and he said it warmly, like it was a compliment, but there was something underneath it that I had heard before, that undertone that meant, "This is your role, you are the one who solves these things, we appreciate it, but we also expect it." I ate my pasta. I talked to my dad about his retirement plan. My mum told a story about a patient at the dental office. My nephews got their pasta and ate it quickly, and the 5-year-old said, "Thank you," in a voice that made my sternum ache. The check came. It was $487 before tip. My dad looked at it and then looked at me, not at my sister, not at my brother-in-law, who had ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, at me. "Do you want to just put it on your card and we'll sort it out?" I looked at the check. I thought about the repayment agreement that was never referenced again. I thought about the bachelorette trip I didn't go on. I thought about the $200 a month for 6 years. I thought about the whiskey and the ribeye and the Barolo and the $68 pasta that was now half in a to-go box and the children's plates I had ordered because the kids were given Sprite and told to eat at home. I thought about how my dad had looked at me, and not at anyone else. I picked up the check. I looked at it carefully. I found my sparkling water, my pasta, and the 2 children's plates. "I've got mine and the kids' food," I said. "That's $114 plus tip." There was a silence at the table that I can only describe as pressurized. My mom said my name in a specific way, the way that meant, "Don't do this here." My dad said, "What?" "I'm happy to cover what I ordered," I said, "and I covered the kids because I wanted to, but I'm not covering the whole dinner." My brother-in-law did a small laugh, not amused. The other kind. "Is Dad's birthday," my sister said. She said it quietly, but with a lot of freight. "I know," I said. "Happy birthday, Dad. I love you. I'm not paying for everyone's dinner." I put my card on the table for my portion, the way you'd flag a card at a diner. I kept my voice even. I didn't make a speech. There was no moment where I stood up and said something devastating, because that's not actually how it happens. What happened was much quieter. I simply declined to do the thing they expected me to do, and the absence of that thing was loud enough. My dad paid the rest on his debit card. My brother-in-law did not offer. My sister looked at the middle distance. My mum did not speak to me directly for the rest of the meal, though she did hug me goodbye in the parking lot in the way that meant she was not actually done with the conversation. I drove home on 270 with the windows down. It was October and cold enough that I should have had them up, but I didn't care. I listened to a podcast about deep-sea fish. I was fine. That's not the whole story. The whole story came in parts over the following weeks, the way fallout always does. My mum called me 2 days later. She said she was disappointed. She said she understood I had my reasons, but that my father had been hurt and that birthdays are not the time to make a point. I listened. I said I heard her. I said I was not trying to make a point. I was telling the truth about what I was and wasn't willing to do. She said, "In our family, we don't do it that way." I said, "I know. I'm changing the way I do it." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your sister needs your support right now." I asked what kind of support. She said financial, that they'd gotten behind on some things and that family takes care of each other and that she and Dad couldn't cover it without tapping into what they'd set aside for their own retirement, which they didn't want to do. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet under the sink, and I looked at Gerald the plant, and I thought about what it would cost me to say yes this one time, and what it had already cost me to say yes all the other times. "Mom," I said, "I love you. I can't." She said, "Can't or won't?" I said, "Both." She was hurt. I knew she would be. That's the part of boundary setting that the inspirational posts don't always prepare you for. That sometimes you can do the right thing, and the person you love most is still genuinely in pain because of it. And holding those 2 things at the same time is a specific kind of hard. My sister texted me 3 days later. The text was long. It explained the financial pressures they were under. Something about a contractor they'd paid who hadn't finished the job, and one of the kids' medical bills from earlier in the year and some credit card things that had stacked up. It was not unreasonable as situations go. It was the kind of thing that happens to people. I did not doubt any of it. At the end of the text she wrote, "I know you have more flexibility than we do. I'm not asking for a loan, just to help out. You've always come through." I read that last line 3 times. You've always come through. Not, I appreciate what you've done. Not, I know it's not fair to ask. Just, you've always come through, as if the coming through were a fixed feature of me, like eye color, like something that did not require a choice each time. I put my phone down. I made coffee. I looked out the window at the parking lot below my apartment where a woman was loading groceries and her kid was helping carry a bag that was too big for him, and she was letting him try anyway. I texted my sister back. I said I loved her and her boys and that I wasn't able to help financially right now and that I hoped things improved for them. She did not respond for 11 days. When she did, it was to send me a link to a birthday event for my mum the following month. The text just said, "Wanted to make sure you saw this." I went to my mum's birthday. I brought flowers and a card, and I hugged my dad longer than usual. My nephews showed me a video game they were playing, and I sat on the carpet with them for 20 minutes while they explained the rules to me in that completely unfiltered way kids do. The 5-year-old climbed into my lap while he played. My sister and I were civil. My brother-in-law shook my hand. My mum seemed lighter than I expected, or maybe I was different, or both. I didn't cover dinner this time. Nobody asked me to. I want to be honest about the part that's hard to explain, because I think it's important. I don't feel righteous about what happened at Volta. I don't have a highlight reel in my head where I said the perfect thing and everyone understood, and the credits rolled. What I have is a quiet that I didn't have before. A kind of internal noise that used to run constantly, that background hum of, am I doing enough? Are they okay? What do they need? Did I miss something? And it's mostly gone now. I still send my parents a little money some months, when I can, and when it feels like an actual gift and not an obligation. The distinction matters. I still drive my mum to her cardiologist. I still answer when they call. What I don't do is carry the whole weight of a dinner table while someone else orders the ribeye. My friend, the one whose bachelorette trip I missed, asked me recently how things were with my family. I thought about it for a real minute before answering. I said, better. She asked if that meant things had gotten easier. I said, no. It means I stopped pretending it was already easy. She nodded and handed me her wine glass because mine was empty. That felt like enough of a response. I still have the photo from that night, though, not from the restaurant. There aren't any from the restaurant. I have the one from beforehand, the one my mum took in the entryway before we left, where my dad has his arm around me and he's looking at the camera and I'm looking at him. He looks genuinely happy. I look like someone holding something up with the side of their body without letting on that they're doing it. I know that look now. I don't wear it anymore. I keep the photo because he was happy that night and that part was real. The rest of it, the check, the to-go box, the silence in the car, that was real too. I've learned to let both things exist without needing one of them to cancel out the other. That's the thing nobody tells you about families like mine, that love and using someone can live inside the same dinner, at the same table, in the same year, and the hardest work isn't separating them. It's learning to love the real thing without funding the other part anymore. I drive my beat-up Civic. The AC works. Gerald the plant is still alive. I don't miss the Sunday dinners, but sometimes on Sunday evenings I do think about the way my dad looked, telling that story about his childhood, how his face went somewhere else entirely, younger and a little uncertain and still hopeful somehow. I think about the 5-year-old saying thank you in that voice. I think about my mum's laugh. I don't miss the weight. But I carry some of them with me anyway, the good parts, the way you carry something small in a coat pocket. Not because you have to, but because you keep reaching for it without thinking, and when you find it there, you're glad. There's a version of that night I used to replay where I handled it differently, where I paid the whole check, smiled, drove home, and told myself it was fine because it kept the peace. I've lived inside that version for most of my adult life. The thing about keeping the peace when the peace was never yours to begin with is that you're not actually preserving anything, you're just delaying the moment when the truth becomes too heavy to carry quietly. What happened at Volta wasn't a decision I made in a flash of anger, it was the result of years of small choices finally catching up to one larger one. And looking back, I think that's how it usually works. The causes are always older than the moment people see. My dad looked at me across that check, not at my brother-in-law, not at my sister, because somewhere along the way a pattern had been established. Patterns don't happen to us. They happen because of us, partly. I had trained them to look at me. Every time I said yes when I meant no, I was teaching them what to expect. The bill at Volta was just the place where I finally stopped teaching that lesson. I've thought about what it actually took to get there, not just the courage to say, I've got mine. Though that part was hard enough. What it took was something more like clarity, the slow-building kind that doesn't arrive in a single moment, but accumulates over years of paying attention to what's actually happening versus what you've been telling yourself is happening. I had been telling myself a story about generosity, that I helped because I wanted to, because it was right, because I loved them. And part of that was true, but part of it was fear. Fear of being the one who didn't come through, fear of losing my place in the family, fear of becoming someone they talked about at dinner instead of someone they called when things went wrong. Untangling those two things, love and fear, took longer than I'd like to admit. The untangling is its own kind of work. It requires honesty with yourself that is genuinely uncomfortable. You have to be willing to see what you've been participating in, not just what's been done to you. And then once you see it, you have to decide what to do with that seeing. That part is the hardest, because knowing something and acting on what you know are two completely different skills. I knew for years that the arrangement wasn't fair. Knowing didn't change anything. Acting changed everything. The act itself was small, putting my card on the table for $114. What it meant was not small. It meant I had decided that my own judgment about what was fair and what I was willing to do mattered as much as everyone else's expectations. That's not a comfortable place to stand. It's a lonely place, at first, but it's solid ground. My nephew said thank you for the pasta. He's 5. He didn't know he was teaching me anything. But I think about that moment more than I think about the check, because the reason I ordered those plates in the first place wasn't strategy. It was just that a child was hungry and I couldn't sit there and do nothing. That instinct, the one that says someone small needs something and I can give it, that's not something I'm trying to undo. That's the part worth keeping. What I'm trying to undo is the version of that instinct that extended to adults who were capable of taking care of themselves and simply preferred not to. I drive my Civic. Gerald is still alive. Some Sundays I think about my dad's face when he was telling that story about his childhood. Younger, uncertain, still hopeful. I carry that. I just don't carry the check anymore.